2020, BRP had announced Evinrude was done. 111 years of history ended with a press release, 100 outboards worth $1 million, and nobody wanted them. Evinrude was just the latest casualty. The American outboard industry used to have dozens of manufacturers. Today, most of those names mean nothing to anyone under 50. Today, we're looking at the outboard brands that dominated American waterways, then disappeared so completely that their motors outlasted the companies that built them. Let's fire them up one last time. Start with the giant that everybody forgot, Johnson Outboards. If you were boating before 2000, you knew Johnson. The company started in 1921 when the Waterman brothers sold their original outboard business and Louis Johnson bought the name. For 8 decades, Johnson motors hung on transoms across every lake, river, and coastline in America. The Seahorse line became iconic, simple, reliable two-strokes that fishermen and families trusted. Johnson competed directly with Mercury and Evinrude, often matching or beating them in sales. Through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, a Johnson outboard meant you were serious about boating without being flashy about it. But the brand started fading in the 1990s. Outboard Marine Corporation, which owned both Johnson and Evinrude, faced mounting financial trouble. Quality control slipped, warranty claims increased, dealers started pushing other brands because they were tired of fixing Johnson problems. In 2000, OMC filed for bankruptcy. Bombardier, which later became BRP, bought the assets. They kept Evinrude and killed Johnson. Just like that, 79 years of brand history ended. The name still appears on used motors at boat yards, but Johnson as a manufacturer ceased to exist in 2007 when BRP officially discontinued the brand. Subscribe to the channel if you have heard of Johnson outboards before. Then there was the Innovator, who peaked too early. Elto Outboard Motors. This company existed from 1921 to 1942, and during that time they pushed technical boundaries that bigger companies wouldn't touch. Elto stood for Evinrude Light Twin Outboard, which tells you something about its origin. Ole Evinrude's son Ralph started the company after his father sold the original Evinrude business. Elto motors were known for being lightweight and powerful relative to their displacement. They used innovative cooling designs and experimented with different cylinder arrangements when most outboards were single-cylinder designs. The Elto Speedster and Elto Quad models became favorites among fishermen who needed reliable power without excessive weight. But Elto faced the same problem many innovative companies face: financial pressure. In 1942, with World War II consuming industrial capacity and materials, Elto merged back into the larger Outboard Marine Corporation family. The brand disappeared, absorbed into the Johnson and Evinrude lines. The innovation lived on, but the name vanished. Some brands died because they refused to change. Champion Outboards operated from the 1930s through the 1950s. These were workmanlike motors, nothing fancy, just reliable power for people who needed to get across water. Champion built a reputation on simplicity and low cost. Their motors used straightforward two-stroke designs with minimal features, which kept prices down and maintenance simple. The problem came when the market shifted. By the 1950s, consumers wanted more than just basic propulsion. They wanted electric start, they wanted better fuel efficiency, they wanted quieter operation. Champion kept building the same basic motors they'd always built, and customers stopped buying them. By the late 1950s, Champion was gone. Not through bankruptcy or dramatic collapse, just gradual irrelevance. They stopped innovating, stopped competing, and eventually stopped existing. Their motors still show up occasionally at swap meets, curiosities from an era when simplicity was enough. Then came the speed demons who burned too bright. Mercury Racing started as part of Mercury Marine but became its own identity focused on high-performance outboards and stern drives. While Mercury Marine continues to thrive, the pure racing division as it existed through the 1980s and 90s has largely been absorbed back into the main brand's performance lines. The racing division built motors that prioritized power over everything else. Reliability mattered only enough to finish the race. Fuel economy was irrelevant. Noise levels were irrelevant. These motors existed to go fast, and they did. Offshore racing circuits were dominated by Mercury racing power plants through the late 20th century. century, but pure racing products represent a tiny market. The costs of developing and supporting race-only engines became harder to justify as racing's popularity declined relative to recreational boating. Mercury Marine absorbed the racing technology into their Verado and Pro XS lines, bringing racing performance to recreational products. The Mercury racing brand still exists technically, but as a performance tier within Mercury Marine rather than as a separate entity. Not every disappearance was about business failure. Chrysler Marine. Yes, that Chrysler. The automotive giant built outboard motors from 1966 to 1984. These were solid, well-engineered motors that brought automotive manufacturing quality to the marine market. Chrysler's marine division used automotive engineering principles, better metallurgy than typical outboards, more sophisticated electrical systems, improved corrosion resistance. The motors worked well and earned good reputations among owners who ran them. So why did Chrysler exit the marine market? Simple corporate strategy. In the early 1980s, Chrysler was fighting for survival in the automotive sector. Lee Iacocca took over as CEO and made the decision to focus entirely on cars and trucks. The marine division was profitable but small, and Iacocca needed to concentrate resources on the core business. In 1984, Chrysler sold the marine division to US Marine, which continued building motors under the Force name for several more years. But Chrysler-branded outboards disappeared, not because they failed, but because the parent company needed to narrow its focus to survive. Some brands vanished into corporate acquisitions so completely that their heritage got erased. Gale products, operating primarily in the 1950s and early 1960s, built outboards under the Gale and Buccaneer names. These were budget-friendly motors, often sold through catalogue retailers like Western Auto and Montgomery Ward. The quality varied, but the prices were hard to beat. Gale motors served the casual boater who couldn't afford Mercury or Johnson, but still needed propulsion. They were simple, often underpowered compared to premium brands, but they worked well enough for fishing small lakes and rivers. Thousands of American families had their first boating experiences behind Gale outboards. By the mid-1960s, Gale was gone. The company was acquired, its manufacturing absorbed into other operations, and the brand name discontinued. Today, finding parts for a Gale outboard means searching swap meets and online auctions. No dealer support, no manufacturer backing, just vintage motors that outlasted the company that built them. Then there was the brand that actually died twice. Evinrude, the name that started the entire outboard industry. Ole Evinrude built the first practical outboard motor in 1909. For over a century, Evinrude meant innovation. They pioneered electric start, they developed power trim and tilt, they pushed two-stroke technology further than anyone thought possible. The E-Tech direct injection system represented the peak of two-stroke design. Clean emissions, excellent fuel economy, and strong power delivery. These motors proved that two strokes could meet modern environmental standards while maintaining the advantages that made them popular in the first place. But in March 2020, BRP announced that Evinrude was finished. Not restructuring, not downsizing, finished. The company cited changing market demand toward four strokes and the cost of developing new engine platforms. The entire Evinrude manufacturing operation in Sturtevant, Wisconsin, shut down. This shocked the marine industry. Evinrude had a loyal customer base, good technology, and strong brand recognition. But BRP decided the investment needed to keep Evinrude competitive wasn't worth making. They focused resources on their other marine brands and let Evinrude die. Dealers were left holding inventory they couldn't sell. Customers who just bought Evinrudes worried about parts availability and resale value. BRP promised to support existing engines with parts for years to come, but the brand itself was gone. 111 years of history ended by a corporate PowerPoint presentation. Not every disappearance was American. Suzuki pulled out of the US outboard market in 2023 for motors above 50 horsepower. This was a strategic withdrawal rather than a business failure. Suzuki continues building outboards for other markets, particularly Asia and Europe, but they decided the competitive pressure in America wasn't worth the investment. The US outboard market is brutal. Mercury, Yamaha, and Honda dominate with massive dealer networks and marketing budgets. Suzuki was making quality motors. The DF series earned good reputations, but they couldn't gain enough market share to justify the costs of competing here. So Suzuki pulled back to smaller motors and focused on markets where they held stronger positions. For American boaters, this meant one less option for repowering and new purchases. Suzuki dealers either switched brands or closed, and another name disappeared from American transoms. Some brands died because the technology they pioneered became obsolete. Scott Atwater built outboards from 1946 to 1960. These motors were known for innovative features like the Bale-O-Matic system, which automatically ejected water that splashed into the boat. They also pioneered through the propeller exhaust, which reduced noise and improved efficiency. Scott Atwater motors were solid mid-range products that competed well against Johnson and Evinrude. But the company faced financial struggles in the late 1950s. In 1960, McCulloch Corporation bought Scott Atwater and continued producing motors under the McCulloch name for several more years. The Scott Atwater brand disappeared, absorbed into McCulloch's broader product line, and eventually McCulloch exited the outboard business entirely, leaving both brand names as historical footnotes. The technology they pioneered became standard across the industry, but the companies that developed it vanished. Then came the catalog brands that served millions but left no legacy. Sears sold outboards under the Ted Williams and Elgin names for decades. These motors were actually built by other manufacturers, primarily Evinrude and Johnson, but branded for Sears. The Ted Williams line was named after the famous baseball player and represented Sears' premium offering. These catalog motors served a huge market of budget-conscious boaters who wanted name-brand reliability at catalog prices. The motors were identical to their Evinrude or Johnson counterparts except for cosmetic details and model names. A Ted Williams 35 horsepower motor was actually an Evinrude 35 with different decals. When Sears exited the catalog business model in the late 20th century, these brands disappeared. No manufacturing shut down because they never had their own factories. No employees lost jobs because they were never separate companies. But the names vanished from the market, and with them went an entire distribution channel for affordable outboards. The pattern behind these disappearances reveals something important. Look at this list and you see several consistent themes. First, most failures came from financial weakness, not product problems. Johnson made good motors, Evinrude made good motors, Champion, Elto, Scott Atwater all built functional products, but they couldn't maintain the financial strength needed to compete long-term. Second, the market consolidated relentlessly. In the 1950s, America had dozens of outboard manufacturers. Today, the market has Mercury Marine, Yamaha, Honda, and Suzuki for motors above 50 horsepower, with Suzuki having withdrawn from most of the US market. Tohatsu remains as a niche player. That consolidation crushed smaller brands through sheer competitive pressure. Third, technological transitions killed companies that couldn't adapt. The shift from two-stroke to four-stroke technology required massive investment in new designs and manufacturing. Companies that couldn't afford that investment, or wouldn't make it, got left behind. Evinrude bet on advanced two-stroke technology when the market was moving to four strokes, and that bet failed. Fourth, corporate strategy matters more than product quality. Chrysler made good outboards but exited the market for strategic reasons. BRP killed Evinrude not because the motors were bad, but because supporting the brand didn't fit their corporate plan. Sometimes companies die because their parent companies decide they're not worth keeping alive. What this means for boaters today. If you're buying an outboard in 2025, this history should inform your decision. Brand longevity matters, parts availability matters, dealer network matters. The best motor in the world becomes worthless if you can't get parts or service when something breaks. That's why the big three, Mercury, Yamaha, and Honda, dominate the current market. They have the financial strength to support products long-term. They have dealer networks spanning North America. They have parts distribution systems that ensure availability for decades. When you buy from these manufacturers, you're buying confidence that support will exist in 10 or 20 years. Smaller brands and new entrants face an uphill battle. Seven Marine built exceptional outboards but couldn't sustain the business independently and got acquired by Volvo Penta. New manufacturers entering the market today need massive capital to compete, and even then, success remains far from guaranteed. For buyers of used outboards, knowing which brands disappeared matters even more. A low-hours Evinrude E-Tech might seem like a bargain, but parts availability concerns and resale value issues should factor into the decision. That Suzuki DF might run great, but will dealer support exist in 5 years? These are real considerations that affect real money. Some disappearances still hurt. The loss of Evinrude particularly stings because it represented genuine innovation. The E-Tech technology was legitimately advanced. Direct injection 2-strokes offered advantages that 4-strokes couldn't match: lighter weight, higher power-to-weight ratios, and simpler mechanical designs. Evinrude proved that 2-strokes could be clean, efficient, and reliable. But the market moved on. Environmental regulations favoured 4-strokes. Consumer perception shifted, and BRP decided that fighting those headwinds cost too much. The technology might have been good enough to succeed, but the business case wasn't strong enough to justify continued investment. That's the brutal reality of the marine industry. Good technology alone doesn't guarantee survival. You need market acceptance, financial strength, dealer support, and strategic commitment. Miss any of those elements and even the best products disappear. So what remains are the survivors, companies with the scale, resources, and commitment to compete in a consolidated global market. The era of small regional outboard manufacturers ended decades ago. Today's market demands massive investment in engineering, manufacturing, distribution, and support. Only the largest companies can afford that investment. For boaters, this consolidation means fewer choices but higher quality. The companies that survived did so by building better products and supporting them properly. Competition among the remaining manufacturers stays intense, driving continued improvement. That benefits consumers, even if it means less diversity in the market. What vanished brand do you remember? Did you ever run a Johnson, an Elto, a Champion? Share your stories in the comments. These brands deserve to be remembered, even if they no longer exist. Thanks for watching.